Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're diving straight into a deeply somber, honestly just profoundly emotional first-hand account written by Professor Dr. Atta Hassan Darwish. It's a beautifully written but absolutely devastating chronicle of a father watching his own son, Abu al-Atta, navigate unimaginable loss. So let's explore the absolute extremes of human grief together. Right at the beginning, the author hits us with this. I had no intention of speaking on this matter were it not for the tears of a friend who lost a part of his children. As I wiped away his tears, I whispered to him, if only my son had been a martyr. Wow. It's a shocking admission, right? For a father to suggest that his own son's death would actually be preferable to his current survival, it immediately sets the stage for our analysis today. It really forces us to ask, what kind of psychological toll could possibly make a father utter those exact words to a grieving friend? To kind of ground the deeply poetic and tragic language we're going to explore today, take a look at this translation. It reads, "Even death seems distant to those who have exhausted all reasons for life." This right here illustrates the core thesis of Dr. Darwish's account. I want to be clear, we aren't looking at a story of a man who survived and is, rebuilding. No, we are looking at the reality of a completely shattered existence. Okay, moving into section 1, the waking nightmare. Let's look at Abu al-Atta's specific reality. The author deliberately juxtaposes this idea of physical release with psychological imprisonment. See, Abu al-Atta had just been released from Offa prison. The expectation, naturally, is that he's stepping into the light. But the text tells us the exact opposite. He literally stepped, quote, from the darkness of a narrow grave into a slightly wider graveyard. Dr. Darwish notes his son didn't return as a whole person. He basically transformed into a breathing corpse, moving at this agonizingly slow pace, just entirely consumed by depression. And here's the real catalyst for that total transformation. Upon his release, the second shattering piece of news was broken to him. His family had perished in a bombardment. His wife, his mother-in-law, his young boy Akata. Think about that for a second. When you're faced with the sudden, complete erasure of your entire family unit, how does the human brain even begin to process that? Well, according to the text, it simply doesn't. When given this horrific news, Abu al-Atta didn't scream. The author actually notes that screams belong to people who still harbor some tiny bit of hope for solace. Instead, his voice fractured in his throat before it could even be born. His eyes just froze in a hollow stare, and the color drained from his face like his very soul had been torn away, right alongside his family. What we're seeing here is a portrait of a psychological system just completely shutting down. That brings us to section 2. The ruin of names, a lingering aftermath. This tragedy was heavily compounded because there was literally nothing left to mourn over. The bombardment didn't just take their lives, it erased all physical traces of their existence. The author paints this absolutely devastating picture of a home turned completely to ashes. There were no walls left to echo past laughter, no small toys left in the corners. There wasn't even the comfort of a bedtime story left behind to help cover the agony of the loss. And without those physical reminders, memory itself turns hostile. Dr. Darwish writes that their names became a haunting phantom pursuing him at every turn. So the crucial takeaway here is that the memory of his loved ones has fully inverted. Instead of being this source of warm nostalgia or comfort, the sheer profound absence of them has turned their memory into a relentless haunting. The text then offers this really powerful comparison regarding his pain. Abu al-Atta bore the physical marks of Israeli torture on his frail body from his time in prison. Yet the author neutrally imparts that these severe physical marks were absolutely nothing compared to the psychological disassociation, the storm of numbness and bewilderment that fully overtook him. The suffering of his mind completely and utterly eclipsed the suffering of his body. To help us really grasp this, the author provides a heartbreaking, incredibly vivid sensory detail. Abu al-Atta would reach out into the empty air, muscle memory prompting him to hold the hand of his young boy, only to discover he was grasping nothing but cold wind and desolate emptiness. It's tough to read, but it beautifully and tragically illustrates the physical sensation of a shattered mind trying to interact with a world that just doesn't exist anymore. Moving on to section 3, a stranger among the living, we look at his daily existence. This quote perfectly encapsulates his current state of limbo. He's physically alive, sure, but psychologically, he's entirely absent. He's disconnected from the survival struggles of the living, their daily bread and oppression, yet he's denied the peace and tranquility of the grave. He is trapped, literally, in an unending waking nightmare, stuck right between two worlds. So let's look at how this actually manifests day to day. We're told he stands for hours on end before the rubble of his home. He just stares into an endless void, conversing with a ghost that only he can see. The text describes his sorrow in very physical terms, noting that his tears fall in heavy silence, quote, like drops of lead. The sheer, crushing weight of his grief is almost tangible to anyone observing him. And to survive this immense weight, his mind has employed the ultimate defense mechanism: total denial. Amidst the heavy tears and the literal rubble, he remains trapped in these unprecedented waves of severe depression, insisting over and over, "My wife is alive, my family is alive." It's a mind completely refusing to accept a reality that is just way too painful to bear. Now let's zoom out a bit for Section 4, the saga of a nation, collective loss. The author concludes that what his son is experiencing is a type of grief that has simply surpassed normal human emotional limits. When a soul freezes mid-journey like this, even the basic act of weeping becomes a luxury. Because of this, his son now asks for only one thing: to leave this world and join the family for whom his heart burns in separation. Which brilliantly brings us full circle back to a truth established early on in our explainer. Yet even death seems miserly to those who have exhausted all reasons to live. When you have lost your entire world and your mind is trapped in a loop of denial and haunting phantoms, merely surviving becomes a form of punishment. But, and this is crucial, the author insists that we shouldn't view this as an isolated incident. He writes that this isn't merely the story of one man. It is the saga of an entire nation writing its history in blood and tears, standing alone against the storm. Abu al-Atta's individual, everlasting pain acts as a mirror, reflecting a homeland that is entirely weighed down by collective loss. This brings us right back to the friend mentioned in the very first slide. Dr. Darwish closes his account with a direct message to that grieving friend. "So, my friend, do not weep. Sorrow has entered every home, and no one has been spared its crushing waves." This tragedy is completely universal across the society. Everyone, it seems, is carrying those drops of lead. We've seen how profound trauma can completely shatter a mind, erase memories, and trap a person in a waking nightmare. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought, directly inspired by Dr. Darwish's closing remarks. If a homeland is so weighed down by loss that even silence has grown weary of speaking, how does a society ever begin to recover when its survivors are trapped in such a state? It's a heavy, heavy question, but one that this text absolutely demands we think about. Thank you so much for joining me today, and as always, keep seeking to understand.